I never imagined my wedding day would end with me placing a wooden box on our marital bed, a box that would make my husband of less than 24 hours fall to his knees and beg in silence. But when you watch the man who just vowed to cherish you forever present his ex-girlfriend with a diamond ring while handing you wilted flowers, something inside you changes. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about dignity. About walking away with your head held high when someone tries to make you feel small. And most importantly, it's about the moment I finally realized my worth wasn't determined by how others valued me, but by how I valued myself. The Cedar Falls town square was lit with fairy lights the night Ethan proposed. April in Iowa can be unpredictable, but that evening was perfect. Cool. Enough for the leather jacket he'd draped over my shoulders, warm enough to sit on the park bench overlooking the river where we'd had our first date. "Vanessa," he said, his voice steady as he knelt on one knee, "I want to build a life with you." There was no dramatic speech, no tears. Just Ethan, pragmatic as always, holding out a modest princess-cut diamond ring. It wasn't extravagant, but it was classic. Safe, like our relationship. "Yes," I answered, feeling the appropriate surge of excitement. Not the lightning bolt of passion I'd read about in novels, but something more sustainable, more mature. At 32, I'd outgrown fairy tales. My third-grade students erupted in cheers the next morning when I showed them my ring. 22 little faces lighting up as if I'd announced an, extra recess. "Are you going to wear a princess dress, Miss Green?" Lily asked, eyes wide. "And have a carriage with horses?" added Jacob. I laughed. "Maybe something simpler, but just as special." Later that day, my best friend Amanda called. We'd been inseparable since college, though her path led to inheriting her family's farm outside town while I pursued teaching. "So he finally did it," she said, her voice carrying a hint of something I couldn't quite place. "I want every detail." I recounted the proposal, trying to infuse my words with the enthusiasm expected of a newly engaged woman. "Sounds nice," Amanda replied after a pause. "But Vanessa, are you sure? About Ethan, I mean. What kind of question is that? I just got engaged." "It's just," she hesitated, "you don't sound like someone who just agreed to spend forever with her soulmate. You sound like someone who accepted a job offer." Her words stung because they bordered on truth, but I'd spent my 20s chasing butterflies with men who eventually flew away. Ethan was different, reliable, present. "Not everyone needs fireworks, Amanda," I said defensively. "Ethan and I have something real, something that lasts." "I know, honey. I just want you to be cherished, not just accommodated." I changed the subject, but her words lingered like a paper cut, small but persistent. That night, scrolling through Instagram to share the news, I paused at a photo in Ethan's tagged pictures. It was posted by Sabrina Miles, his ex-girlfriend from Chicago. The caption read, "Missing these days, Shucker Memory Lane, our first love." It was Ethan and Sabrina at some lakeside cabin, his arms wrapped around her waist, both laughing. The timestamp showed it was from 3 years ago, a year before we met. I stared at it longer than I should have. There was something in his eyes when he looked at her that I hadn't seen directed at me. A spark, an intensity. When Ethan came home from his accounting firm, I was waiting in the living room of our modest apartment. "Something wrong?" he asked, loosening his tie. "Sabrina posted an old photo of you two today," I said, aiming for casual but landing somewhere near accusatory. He shrugged. "We're still friends. It's not a big deal." "She hashtagged it first love." "And that's what she was," he replied, his tone even. "It doesn't change anything between us. Would you be okay if my ex was posting throwback photos of us?" "If it was innocent, sure." He sat beside me, taking my hand. "Vanessa, I proposed to you, not her. Doesn't that tell you everything you need to know?" I nodded, appeased, but not entirely convinced. Still, I pushed the unease aside. This was adult love. Complicated, messy, with histories that couldn't be erased. It was unreasonable to expect him to cut all ties with someone who'd been important to him. The following months were a blur of wedding planning. My mother flew in from Arizona twice to help with arrangements. We settled on a small ceremony at the Cedar Falls Botanical Gardens, followed by a reception at the Mill, a renovated factory-turned-event space downtown. The guest list was modest, 60 people, mostly family and close friends. When Ethan asked if he could invite Sabrina, explaining that they'd remained friends and she was passing through Iowa that weekend, I hesitated. Is that really appropriate? Your ex at our wedding? It's not like we had a bad breakup, he explained. We just wanted different things. She moved to New York for her career, I stayed for mine. It was mutual. I wanted to be the cool, confident fiancé who wasn't threatened by his past. So I said yes, a decision I would later come to regret deeply. 2 weeks before the wedding, I was at Ethan's apartment while he was at work, dropping off his tailored suit. We'd decided to keep separate places until after the ceremony, a traditional touch my mother appreciated. As I was leaving, I noticed his tablet on the coffee table, the screen lighting up with a notification. I shouldn't have looked, but some instinct, the same one I'd been ignoring for months, made me pick it up. The notification was a message from Sabrina. Can't wait to see you. I have something important to tell you when I'm in town. My finger hovered over the message. One tap and I could open their conversation history. One tap to either confirm my growing suspicions or put them to rest forever. I tapped. Their exchange was casual at first, updates about work, mutual friends. But then I scrolled to a message from 3 months ago, just after our engagement. Sabrina, so you're really doing this? Marriage? Never thought I'd see the day. Ethan, people change, or at least their priorities do. Sabrina, and what are your priorities now, Ethan Donovan? Ethan, stability, a future, the things you weren't interested in. Sabrina, maybe I've changed too. Ethan hadn't responded to that last message, but 2 weeks later he'd messaged her about our wedding date, adding, would mean a lot if you could be there. I put the tablet down, my hands shaking. There was nothing explicitly inappropriate in their conversation, nothing I could point to as evidence of betrayal. Yet, something felt off, an undercurrent I couldn't name. When Amanda called that evening to finalize bridesmaid details, I confided in her. I don't know, maybe I'm overreacting, I concluded. Or maybe your intuition is trying to tell you something, she countered. Vanessa, it's not too late to postpone, to take some time to be sure. And look like the crazy, jealous fiancé? No thanks. I forced a laugh. Besides, everything's paid for. My mom's already flew in. It's happening. Just promise me something, Amanda said seriously. If anything feels wrong, and I mean anything, you'll listen to yourself. Not him, not your mom, not me. Yourself. I promise, I said, meaning it, but not fully understanding what that promise would eventually ask of me. I didn't know then that my wedding day would become the moment everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and myself would be turned upside down, or that a simple wooden box would become the vessel of my liberation. The morning of our rehearsal dinner, I woke to find Ethan already gone, a note on his pillow explaining he had errands to run. Our wedding was the next day, and all the arrangements were finalized. What errands could possibly take priority? I tried calling, but got his voicemail. An hour later, he texted, sorry, busy. See you at dinner. Love you. The terseness wasn't like him. Ethan was never effusive, but he was usually more communicative. I pushed down my anxiety and focused on getting ready. The rehearsal dinner was at Black Hawk Bistro, an upscale restaurant overlooking the river. I arrived early with my parents, greeting guests as they filtered in. Amanda hugged me tightly, whispering, you look beautiful, but tense. Everything okay? Ethan's been AWOL all day, I admitted. Probably just pre-wedding jitters. She frowned, but didn't push. When Ethan finally arrived 40 minutes late, he wasn't alone. Sabrina Miles walked in beside him, her hand casually resting on his arm. She was striking in a way that made heads turn. Tall, with cascading dark hair, and the confident posture of someone who knew her worth. Sorry we're late, Ethan announced to the room. Had to pick up Sabrina from the airport. Flight was delayed. I stood frozen, a practiced smile plastered on my face as they approached. My fiancé had spent the day with his ex-girlfriend instead of helping with last-minute preparations, instead of being with me. Vanessa. Sabrina embraced me like we were old friends. Finally we meet. Ethan's told me so much about you. Wish I could say the same, I replied, my tone lighter than I felt. Sabrina laughed, a melodic sound that somehow made me feel even more inadequate. Well, we have all evening to get acquainted. Throughout dinner, I watched them interact. They had inside jokes, shared memories, an ease that comes from years of intimacy. Each laugh they shared felt like a small betrayal. So how did you two meet? Sabrina asked over dessert. Her question directed at me, but her eyes on Ethan. Community fundraiser, I answered. Ethan was doing the accounts for a local charity I volunteer with. Practical, she smiled. We met skydiving. Ethan was terrified, but he jumped anyway. That's when I knew he was special, willing to face his fears. I blinked, surprised. You went skydiving? You hate heights. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. It was a phase. A 3-year phase, Sabrina added, taking a sip of her wine. We did all sorts of crazy things. Remember that spontaneous trip to Montreal? Just decided Friday afternoon and were across the border by midnight. Each revelation was a small crack in the foundation of what I thought I knew about the man I was marrying. The Ethan I knew was calculated, measured. He planned vacations 6 months in advance and checked the weather forecast twice before deciding if he needed an umbrella. After dinner, Amanda cornered me in the restroom. What the hell is going on? He's practically fawning over her. They have history, I said defensively, though I wasn't sure why I was defending him. It's awkward, but it doesn't mean anything. Vanessa, open your eyes. He's different around her, more alive somehow. Stop it, I hissed, checking to ensure we were alone. It's the night before my wedding. I don't need this right now. That's exactly why you need this now. Before, the door swung open and Sabrina walked in, cutting Amanda off mid-sentence. Sorry to interrupt, girl talk. She smiled, moving to the mirror to reapply her lipstick, a bold red that made her look even more striking. I just wanted a moment alone with you, Vanessa, to say congratulations. Ethan's a wonderful man. Thank you, I managed. We had our chance, but timing is everything, isn't it? She continued, her eyes meeting mine in the mirror. He needs someone steady, grounding. That's you. There was something in her tone. Not quite condescension, but close. As if she was giving me her blessing to be the safe, boring choice. Ethan and I balance each other, I replied, straightening my shoulders. That's what makes us work. Of course, she nodded, capping her lipstick. Balance is important. She turned. To leave, then paused. Oh, and don't worry about me being at the wedding tomorrow. I'll be discreet. Wouldn't want to overshadow the bride. After she left, Amanda gave me a look that said everything she was too kind to verbalize. I'm fine, I insisted, though I wasn't. One more day and she'll be gone. But as we rejoined the party, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. The carefully constructed narrative of my relationship with Ethan was unraveling, thread by thread, revealing a tapestry far different from what I'd believed. Later that night, as Ethan drove me home, I finally asked the question burning in my throat. Do you still have feelings for her? He kept his eyes on the road. For Sabrina? No, that's long over. You seem different around her. Lighter, more what? Passionate, I admitted. Like she brings out a side of you I don't see. He sighed, reaching for my hand. Sabrina and I burned hot, but we burned out. What we have is sustainable, Vanessa. Real. Real doesn't have to mean subdued, I countered, pulling my hand away. Sometimes I wonder if you settled for me because I was available, convenient. That's ridiculous, he said, but there was a hesitation in his voice that hollowed out my chest. Look, pre-wedding nerves are normal. Let's not create problems where there aren't any. We rode the rest of the way in silence. At my apartment door, he kissed me goodnight, our last kiss as an unmarried couple. It felt perfunctory, a checkbox ticked. I'll see you at the altar, he said, squeezing my hand. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying moments from our relationship, searching for signs I might have missed. The way he changed the subject whenever I brought up having children, how he still hadn't fully committed to moving to Arizona when I eventually wanted to be closer to my aging parents. The fact that after 2 years together, he still kept his apartment exactly as it had been when we met. Nothing added, nothing of mine integrated into his space. Had I been so desperate for stability that I'd ignored the obvious? Had I convinced myself that practical compatibility was enough, when deep down I knew it wasn't? Morning came too quickly. My mother bustled around, excited, directing the makeup artist and photographer. Amanda watched me carefully, concern etched in her features. It's not too late, she whispered as she helped me into my dress, a simple A-line with delicate lace details. If you have doubts, everyone has doubts, I interrupted. It doesn't mean they're valid. But as I stood before the mirror, the woman staring back at me looked like a stranger wearing a costume, playing the role of happy bride without feeling the part. My father knocked gently on the door. It's time, sweetheart. Taking a deep breath, I forced a smile. I'm ready. I had no idea that in a few hours, I'd be placing a wooden box on our honeymoon bed, a box that would change everything. The Cedar Falls Botanical Gardens transformed into a dream that Saturday afternoon, white chairs arranged in neat rows, an arch of roses and baby's breath marking the altar, and soft classical music floating through the spring air. It should have been perfect. On paper, it was. As I stood hidden in the garden house, waiting for my cue, I caught a glimpse of Ethan at the altar. He looked handsome in his tailored navy suit, his posture straight and confident. His eyes scanned the gathering crowd, and I followed his gaze to the third row where Sabrina sat, stunning in a pale blue dress that highlighted her elegant figure. My father squeezed my arm. "Ready, Vanessa?" I nodded, unable to trust my voice. The music shifted to the processional, and we began our walk. 60 faces turned toward me with expressions of joy, admiration, and in Amanda's case, cautious concern. My steps felt mechanical, each one bringing me closer to a future I was suddenly uncertain about. When my father placed my hand in Ethan's, I searched his eyes for something, any flicker of awe, adoration, or even simple happiness. What I found was warmth, yes, but also a strange detachment, as if he too were playing a role in someone else's story. The ceremony proceeded like a well-rehearsed play. We exchanged traditional vows, promises to love, honor, and cherish. When Ethan slid the wedding band onto my finger, his hands were steady, his voice clear, professional almost. I wondered if anyone else noticed the absence of emotion that seemed so glaring to me. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared. "You may kiss the bride." Ethan's kiss was gentle but brief, appropriate for the setting but lacking the passion of a man sealing his lifelong commitment. As we turned to face our guests, their applause washed over us, and I smiled so widely my cheeks ached from the effort. The reception at the mill was beautifully arranged. Wildflower centerpieces on each table, string lights crisscrossing the exposed beam ceiling, and a small but elegant cake displayed near the dance floor. During our first dance, Ethan held me properly, one hand at my waist, the other clasping mine. "You look beautiful," he said, his first genuine compliment of the day. "Thank you," I replied, searching for something more meaningful to say but coming up empty. As the song ended, he led me back to our table where a peculiar sight awaited me. A bouquet of hydrangeas, clearly several days old, their edges browning, their blooms drooping. "What's this?" I asked, confusion creasing my brow. "I picked them up earlier this week," Ethan explained. "Meant to be a surprise. They're your favorite, right?" "Peonies," I corrected quietly. "My favorites are peonies." He frowned slightly. "Are you sure?" I could have sworn. A flicker of realization crossed his face before he quickly masked it. Sabrina loved hydrangeas. He'd confused us. A minor slip that suddenly felt monumental. Before I could process this, the DJ announced it was time for toasts. My father spoke first, his voice thick with emotion as he welcomed Ethan to our family. Amanda followed with a carefully worded speech that celebrated our friendship while tactfully avoiding any emphatic endorsement of my marriage. Then Ethan stood, champagne flute in hand. "I want to thank everyone for sharing this day with us," he began, his voice steady, "especially those who've been part of our journey to this moment." His eyes found Sabrina in the crowd, and something passed between them, a look of such intimate understanding that I felt like an intruder witnessing it. "Before we move forward," he continued, "I'd like to properly close a chapter and acknowledge the past that helped shape who I am today." He reached beneath the head table and produced a small blue box, unmistakably Tiffany's signature packaging. My heart stuttered as he walked purposefully toward Sabrina's table. "Sabrina," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent room. "We shared many years together, and while our paths diverged, your influence on my life remained significant." He handed her the box. The crowd watched, confused but intrigued. As she opened it, her gasp was audible, followed by a breathless, "Oh, Ethan." Inside was a platinum ring with sapphire accents, not an engagement ring, but certainly not a casual gift either. Inscribed inside, as I would later discover, was their anniversary date. "Consider it a proper goodbye," Ethan explained to the bewildered guests, "a symbol of gratitude for the years that prepared me for this new chapter." Some people chuckled awkwardly. Others exchanged uncomfortable glances. Amanda's face had turned to stone. Sabrina slipped the ring onto her right hand, beaming. "It's perfect," she gushed, standing to embrace him. Their hug lasted several beats too long. I sat frozen, the wilted hydrangeas before me, watching my husband publicly honor his ex-girlfriend with a custom piece of jewelry, while I clutched flowers he'd bought days ago and couldn't even remember were the wrong kind. The moment crystallized everything I'd been trying to ignore. The comparison was so stark, so humiliating, that I couldn't even summon tears. Instead, a strange calm washed over me, the kind that comes when uncertainty finally solidifies into certainty. For the remainder of the reception, I moved through the motions. I danced with my father, I cut the cake with Ethan, I threw my bouquet, not the wilted hydrangeas, but my bridal bouquet, which Amanda caught with a look of ironic resignation. Through it all, I maintained a smile so convincing that no one, except perhaps Amanda, suspected the seismic shift occurring within me. Every laugh, every touch, every posed photograph was part of an elaborate performance that would end when the last guest departed. As we prepared to leave for our hotel, the first night of a honeymoon that would take us to Maui the following day, Amanda pulled me aside. "What was that?" she hissed, her eyes flashing with protective anger. "That," I replied with unnerving calm, "was Clarity. Vanessa, he humiliated you. In front of everyone. On your wedding day." "Yes," I agreed. "He did. And you're still going with him? After that display?" I squeezed her hand. "Trust me, Amanda. I know exactly what I'm doing now." Her eyes searched mine, and whatever she found there seemed to reassure her, if only slightly. "Call me. Anytime. For anything." I nodded, then rejoined Ethan for our grand exit. Guests lined the pathway, tossing lavender buds as we passed. In the car, Ethan attempted normal conversation, seemingly oblivious to the magnitude of his actions. "I think that went well," he remarked as we drove toward the Cedar Falls Grand Hotel. Everyone seemed to have a good time. I studied his profile in the dim light. The man I'd just married was a stranger to me. Or perhaps I was finally seeing him clearly for the first time. "The ring you gave." "Sabrina," I said evenly. "It must have cost a fortune." He glanced at me, then back at the road. "It wasn't inexpensive," he admitted, "but it felt important to make a clean break, to put the past properly behind us. With a custom platinum and sapphire ring. It's symbolic, Vanessa, nothing more." "And what do the wilted hydrangeas symbolize?" I asked, my voice so calm it seemed to belong to someone else. He had the decency to look embarrassed. "I'm sorry about that. I should have been more thoughtful." "Yes," I agreed. "You should have." We arrived at the hotel in silence. The honeymoon suite was elegant. A king-sized bed strewn with rose petals, champagne chilling in an ice bucket, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. I excused myself to the bathroom, changing out of my wedding dress into the silk nightgown I'd bought for this night. But instead of returning to the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bathtub and made a call. "Amanda? It's me. I need you to bring me something from my apartment, and don't let anyone see you." Morning light filtered through the curtains of the honeymoon suite, casting soft shadows across the rumpled sheets. Ethan slept soundly. Beside me, one arm flung across his face, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. Our wedding night had been mechanical, a perfunctory consummation of vows that felt as hollow as the promises we'd exchanged. I slipped out of bed quietly, retrieving the wooden box from where I'd hidden it in my suitcase after Amanda's midnight delivery. The box wasn't particularly remarkable. A simple hinged container with a smooth, polished surface. What made it powerful was what it contained. Truth. For weeks, I'd been collecting evidence. Screenshots of messages between Ethan and Sabrina, credit card statements showing the purchase of the sapphire ring 2 months before our wedding, and most damning of all, a series of emails discussing their unfinished business and plans to meet privately during her visit to Iowa. I hadn't confronted him immediately because I needed to be sure, because I wanted to believe I was wrong, because facing the truth meant admitting I'd ignored my instincts for far too long. But after yesterday, after watching him present her with that ring while handing me dying flowers, certainty settled over me like a second skin. I placed the box in the center of the bed, then showered and dressed in jeans and a simple blouse. No makeup, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. The woman in the mirror looked different somehow, clearer-eyed, more resolute. When I returned to the bedroom, Ethan was awake, staring at the wooden box with confusion. "What's this?" he asked, voice still thick with sleep. "Open it," I replied, standing at the foot of the bed, arms crossed. He sat up, reaching for the box with idle curiosity that quickly morphed into apprehension as he lifted the lid. Inside, neatly arranged, were printouts of all the evidence I'd gathered, topped with a legal document, an annulment filing I'd prepared with a lawyer friend the week before just in case. His face drained of color as he flipped through the pages. "Vanessa, I can explain." "There's nothing." "To explain," I interrupted, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "It's all there in black and white. You never stopped loving her. Maybe you never will." "That's not true," he protested, but the conviction in his voice wavered. "These messages are taken out of context. The ring was just closure." $5,000 for closure? I raised an eyebrow. "While I got 3-day-old hydrangeas that weren't even my favorite flower?" He flinched. "It was a mistake. I should have been more thoughtful. The flowers weren't the mistake, Ethan. They were a symptom. The mistake was thinking I wouldn't notice how you light up around her in a way you never do with me. The mistake was believing I'd settle for being your second choice." "You're not my second choice," he insisted, standing now, agitation evident in his movements. "I married you, didn't I?" "Yes, you did. And then you humiliated me at our wedding by publicly honoring your ex-girlfriend with a gift that cost more than my engagement ring." My voice remained calm, almost detached. "That's not the action of a man who's moved on." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration building. "You're overreacting. The ring meant nothing. If it meant nothing, why did you have her initials engraved inside? Why did you spend hours picking out the perfect sapphires to match her eyes? I'd found the emails to the jeweler, each one detailing his exacting specifications." Ethan's face registered shock. He hadn't known I'd discovered those particular messages. "You went through my emails," he accused, attempting to shift blame. "Only after finding messages from her on your tablet. Messages where you told her you sometimes wondered what would have happened if she'd stayed in Iowa instead of moving to New York." I took a step closer. "Messages from the night before our wedding where you said you'd always wonder what might have been." His silence was confirmation enough. "I don't hate you, Ethan," I continued, surprising myself with the truth of it. "I pity you, because you're so afraid of burning too hot that you settled for barely flickering at all. With me. That's not fair," he whispered. "No, it wasn't fair. To either of us." I gestured to the box. "You'll find the annulment papers on top. We qualify since it's been less than 24 hours and we have grounds of fraud. You entered this marriage under false pretenses." "Fraud?" he repeated incredulously. "I didn't lie to you. Lies of omission are still lies, Ethan. You never told me you were still in love with her. That's the kind of information a person might want before saying, 'I do.'" He sank onto the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped. "What happens now? You sign the papers. We file for annulment. You keep the ring. The one you gave me, not the one you gave her. It's yours. You bought it." I paused, letting the weight of my next words settle between us. "And then you figure out what you really want, because it clearly isn't me." "Vanessa, please." He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "We can work through this. Couples therapy, a fresh start." "No," I said simply. "We can't." Because of one mistake? One thoughtless gift? Because I deserve to be cherished, not tolerated. Because I refuse to spend my life competing with a ghost. Because I took a deep breath. I finally respect myself enough to walk away. Something shifted in his expression then. Recognition, perhaps, of the truth he'd been avoiding as much as I had. "I never meant to hurt you," he said quietly. "I know," I acknowledged. "But you did. And now we both have to live with that." I collected my suitcase, already packed with the essentials. The rest of my things could wait. "Where will you go?" he asked, looking lost in the middle of the honeymoon suite that now felt like a mausoleum to our failed attempt at forever. "To Amanda's," I replied. "After that, I'm not sure. Maybe Arizona to be near my parents for a while." He nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the wooden box between us, the physical manifestation of our broken promises. As I reached the door, he called out one last time, "I did love you, Vanessa. In my way." I turned back, offering a sad smile. Your way wasn't enough, for either of us. And with that, I closed the door on what might have been, stepping into the uncertain promise of what could be. The weight that had been, pressing on my chest for months, lifted with each step I took away from room 302 of the Cedar Falls Grand Hotel. Outside, the April morning was bright and clear. I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs with the scent of possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "On my way, you okay?" Yes, I typed back, surprised by how true it felt. For the first time in a long time, I really am. Amanda's farmhouse stood like a sanctuary amid rolling fields of corn and soybeans. The white clapboard structure with its wraparound porch had been in her family for 3 generations, and as I stepped through the front door, the familiar creaking of wooden floorboards welcomed me home in a way my shared apartment with Ethan never had. Guest room's all set up, Amanda said, carrying my suitcase. Up the stairs. I put fresh lavender sachets under the pillow. Figured you could use some calm. The room was bathed in soft morning light, with handmade quilts folded at the foot of an iron frame bed and windows overlooking acres of farmland. It felt like stepping back in time, to something simpler, more honest. Thank you, I whispered, emotions finally catching up to me. For everything. Amanda set down my bag and pulled me into a fierce hug. You did the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do, she said against my hair. I'm so damn proud of you. Those words broke the dam. Tears came in a sudden flood, not of regret or heartbreak, but of relief. I sobbed against her shoulder, releasing months of doubt and disappointment, of trying to convince myself that practical compatibility was enough, that passion was overrated, that stability trumped joy. It's okay, Amanda soothed, rubbing circles on my back. Let it out. You're safe here. When the storm passed, we moved to the kitchen where Amanda brewed strong coffee and slid a plate of homemade banana bread across the worn oak table. So what now? She asked, sitting across from me. Besides canceling the honeymoon, I'd already called the travel agency from the car, explaining the situation in clipped professional terms. They'd been sympathetic, promising to recover what they could of our deposits. Honestly, I have no idea. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. I need to call my parents. They're probably wondering why we didn't check in this morning. They called me already, Amanda admitted. I told them you were safe but needed some time. They understand, Van. They just want you to be okay. I nodded, grateful for the reprieve, explaining everything to my mother, who'd been so thrilled about the wedding, who'd flown back to Arizona just yesterday, felt overwhelming. My job starts again in 2 weeks, I said, thinking aloud. The 3rd graders will have questions. Everyone will have questions. Let them. Ask, Amanda shrugged. You don't owe anyone explanations. Small town, I reminded her. People talk. People always talk, but they'll find something else to gossip about soon enough. She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Besides, anyone who saw that ring debacle will be on your side. My phone buzzed insistently on the table. Ethan's name flashing on the screen for the 5th time. That morning, I silenced it without answering. He's been texting too, I said, scrolling through the messages. We need to talk. Please come back. We can figure this out. I made a mistake, but it doesn't have to end like this. Vanessa, at least answer so I know you're safe. He sounds worried, Amanda observed, reading over my shoulder. He's worried about how this looks, I corrected. About having to explain to everyone why his bride of one day left him. The bitter edge in my voice surprised me. I wasn't an angry person by nature, but the humiliation of yesterday had carved something raw and unfamiliar inside me. You should respond, Amanda advised gently. Not for him. For you. Closure. I nodded, typing a brief message. I'm safe. I'm staying with Amanda. Please sign the papers, and have your lawyer contact mine. I don't want this to be uglier than it already is. His response came immediately. Can we please talk face to face? I never meant to hurt you. I stared at those words, feeling a strange detachment. He never meant to hurt me. As if intent negated impact. As if his thoughtlessness was a sufficient excuse for public humiliation. No, I replied simply. There's nothing left to say. I set the phone down and turned it face down on the table. Done, I declared with finality. Good, Amanda nodded approvingly. Now, what do you want to do with your first day of freedom? I laughed, a sound so unexpected it startled me. Freedom? Is that what this is? Damn right it is, she insisted. You just walked away from a lifetime of being second best. That's the definition of freedom. Put that way, my actions seemed less like failure and more like self-preservation. I considered her question seriously. I want to sit on your porch swing and watch the sunset, I decided. I want to drink wine and not think about anything more complicated than what color the sky turns. That, Amanda declared, is an excellent plan. The day passed quietly. I called my parents, giving them a condensed version of events. My mother cried, more from concern for me than disappointment over the marriage. My father, ever practical, asked about legal implications and financial entanglements. I assured them both I was handling things, that I'd be fine, that this was for the best. By evening, as Amanda and I settled onto the porch swing with glasses of Merlot, my phone had finally stopped its persistent buzzing. Ethan had given up, at least temporarily. The knowledge brought both relief and a hollow ache, not for what I'd lost, but for what had never really existed. Did I do the right thing? I asked softly as twilight painted the horizon in watercolor hues of pink and gold. Amanda considered the question carefully. Do you regret it? No, I answered immediately, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. I regret ignoring the signs for so long. I regret walking down that aisle when my instincts were screaming not to, but I don't regret leaving. Then you did the right thing, she said simply. The bravest thing isn't always leaving, you know. Sometimes it's admitting you made a mistake and fixing it before it costs you years of your life. As darkness settled over the farmland, stars emerging like scattered diamonds against black velvet, I felt something unexpected take root inside me. Not happiness exactly, but potential. The possibility of happiness waiting beyond this moment of upheaval. I'm thinking of applying for that teaching position in Phoenix, I said suddenly. The one near my parents. The one Ethan didn't want me to. Consider, Amanda smiled. I think that's a great idea. It would mean leaving Cedar Falls. Leaving you. I'm not going anywhere, she promised. Besides, they have these amazing inventions called airplanes and phones. I laughed again, the sound becoming more natural each time. True, and you could visit in winter, escape the Iowa freeze. See? Already finding the silver linings. She clinked, her glass against mine. To new beginnings. To dignity, I countered, raising my glass to the star-filled sky. As we rocked gently on the porch swing, surrounded by the symphony of cicadas and distant farm machinery, I felt the first real stirrings of peace. Whatever came next, the gossip, the legal proceedings, the inevitable awkward encounters in our small town, I would face it with my head held high. Because walking away from Ethan's half-hearted love wasn't a failure. It was the first step toward finding something real. Monday morning arrived with the harsh reality of life continuing despite personal upheaval. My phone had accumulated 37 missed calls and 22 text messages, from Ethan, from concerned friends, from relatives who'd attended the wedding and were desperate for explanations. You don't have to go into town today, Amanda said over breakfast, watching me scroll through notifications with a grimace. Hide out here as long as you need. The temptation to cocoon myself in the safety of her farmhouse was strong, but avoidance wouldn't solve anything. I need to face it eventually, I replied, reaching for my car keys. Might as well be on my terms. Cedar Falls wasn't large, population just under 40,000, but it had always felt comfortable to me. Walking its tree-lined streets, I'd appreciated the balance between anonymity and community. Today, however, Main Street seemed fraught with potential encounters, each storefront a possible stage for awkward exchanges. My first stop was the bank, where I needed to halt the process of merging our accounts, a task I'd initiated weeks ago in anticipation of married life. The teller, Diane, had been at my wedding. Her eyes widened with recognition as I approached. Vanessa, we didn't expect to see you today. Her gaze dropped to my bare left hand where my wedding ring had been 2 days earlier. I need to stop the account merger paperwork, I said quietly but firmly. And I'd like to open a new, individual account, please. To her credit, Diane maintained professional composure, though curiosity practically radiated from her. Of course. Let me get the forms. As she bustled away, I felt eyes on me from across the lobby. Mrs. Peterson, my former Sunday school teacher, whispering behind her hand to another woman. I straightened my shoulders and offered a polite nod in their direction. Their hushed conversation immediately ceased. This, I realized, would be my new normal for a while. Whispers, curious glances, the weight of unasked questions. After the bank came the post office, where I needed to ensure no change of address forms were processed. The clerk there hadn't attended the wedding but had clearly heard something. His careful avoidance of my gaze told me everything. Is there anything else you need help with today, Ms. Green? He asked, pointedly using my maiden name. That's all, thank you, I replied, refusing to show discomfort. By the time I reached Perkins Cafe for lunch, I was emotionally exhausted, but determined to reclaim my routines. Saturday's bride having lunch alone on Monday was bound to create a stir, but hiding would only fuel speculation. I chose a corner booth, ordered my usual turkey club, and opened the book I'd brought as a shield against conversation. The strategy worked for approximately 7 minutes before Meredith Collins slid into the seat across from me. Meredith had been my colleague at Cedar Falls Elementary for 5 years, teaching 4th grade to my 3rd. She was also one of the town's most prolific gossips, thinly disguised. As concern, "Vanessa," she breathed, eyes wide with manufactured sympathy. "I've been so worried. Everyone's talking about what happened at the reception. That ring he gave his ex? Simply appalling." I marked my page deliberately before looking up. "Hello, Meredith. Is it true you left him at the hotel? Shannon from the front desk said you walked out Sunday morning with your suitcase looking like you'd been crying." She leaned forward, hungry for confirmation. The surge of anger I felt was surprising in its intensity. Not at Ethan, but at this culture of treating personal pain as entertainment. "Meredith," I said evenly, "I appreciate your concern, but I'm not discussing my private life in Perkins Cafe." Of course, she backpedaled, though disappointment flashed in her eyes. "I just wanted you to know we're all on your side. What Ethan did was unforgivable." The irony wasn't lost on me. How quickly people chose sides in stories that weren't theirs to divide. I'd become the sympathetic character in Cedar Falls' latest drama, cast as the wronged woman without any say in the narrative being constructed around me. "Thank you for your support," I said neutrally. "If you'll excuse me, I'd like to finish my lunch." She retreated reluctantly, and I returned to my book, though the words blurred before my eyes. What Ethan did was unforgivable. But wasn't it? Hadn't I already forgiven him? Not for his sake, but for my own? My anger wasn't directed at him anymore. It was aimed at myself for ignoring what had been evident from the beginning, that his heart had never fully belonged to me. As I paid my bill, the waitress, Jamie, a former student's mother, slipped me a folded napkin. "On the house," she whispered with a conspiratorial smile. Inside was written, "Their opinions don't define you. Hold your head high." The simple kindness nearly undid me. I tucked the napkin into my purse like a talisman against judgment. My final stop was Cedar Falls Legal Aid, where my friend Layla worked as an attorney. I needed advice on the annulment filing, which Ethan had yet to sign and return. Layla ushered me into her office with a warm hug. "I heard," she said simply. "Are you okay?" "Getting there," I admitted, "but I need help making this official." She nodded. "All business now. If he doesn't sign, we can still proceed, but it gets more complicated. Have you heard from him at all?" "He's called and texted, but I haven't spoken to him directly." I pulled out my phone, showing her Ethan's most recent message from that morning. "We need to talk about this in person. Please meet me. I've spoken with Sabrina. She's returning the ring." It was a mistake. Layla's expression hardened. Classic. Only sorry when caught, and only because of the consequences, not the action itself. "He says he wants to meet," I continued. "Part of me thinks I should, just to get closure, to make him understand why I left." "Do you really need him to understand?" Layla asked carefully. "Or do you need to prove something to yourself?" Her question struck deeper than I expected. Was I seeking validation? Wanting Ethan to acknowledge the depth of his mistake so I could feel justified in my decision? "I don't know," I admitted. "But I can't move forward feeling like there's unfinished business." "Then meet him," she advised. "But on your terms, in a public place, with clear boundaries. And remember, you don't owe him absolution." I nodded, grateful for her clarity. "I'll text him. One conversation, and then it's done." As I left Layla's office, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps. Cedar Falls continued its Monday rhythm around me. People shopping, working, living their ordinary lives while mine had been turned inside out. Yet for the first time, I felt a stirring of gratitude for this small town with its whispers and watchful eyes. Because despite the gossip, there was also Jamie's napkin note, Layla's fierce loyalty, and the foundation of a community that had shaped me long before Ethan entered my life. I texted him from my car, "I'll meet you tomorrow, 2 p.m. at Overman Park. One conversation, Ethan. That's all I'm offering." His response came immediately. "Thank you. I'll be there." Driving back to Amanda's farm, I realized I was no longer dreading the encounter. Whatever Ethan said, whether he begged for another chance or merely sought to salve his conscience, couldn't change my decision. The power in our relationship had shifted irrevocably. I was no longer the woman desperately trying to make a tepid love feel warm. I was the woman who had placed a wooden box on our marriage bed and walked away with her dignity intact, and nothing he could say would make me regret that choice. Overman Park stretched across 3 city blocks in downtown Cedar Falls, its century-old oak trees providing welcome shade on what had become an unseasonably warm spring day. I arrived 20 minutes early, choosing a bench with good visibility, but enough distance from the playground to ensure privacy. The familiar setting, where I'd taken my third graders for nature walks, and where Ethan and I had sometimes picnicked on summer evenings, now felt charged with new significance. I wore a simple sundress and sandals, my hair loose around my shoulders, makeup minimal. The woman who stared back at me from my compact mirror looked composed, if slightly tired around the eyes. No trace remained of the carefully styled bride from 3 days earlier. Ethan arrived 5 minutes early, scanning the park until he spotted me. Even from a distance, I could see the strain in his features, the shadows beneath his eyes, the slight disarray of his usually impeccable hair. He'd lost the confident stride that normally characterized his movements, approaching instead with the cautious gait of someone unsure of their welcome. "Vanessa," he said as he reached the bench, my name falling from his lips like a question. "Ethan," I acknowledged, gesturing for him to sit beside me. "Thank you for coming." He settled at the opposite end of the bench, maintaining a careful distance between us. "I wasn't sure you'd actually show up." I said I would. The words came out sharper than intended. I softened my tone. "I keep my promises." The unspoken accusation hung in the air between us. Ethan winced but didn't deny it. "I've been trying to call you," he began. "I know. The papers you left, the annulment filing." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture I'd once found endearing. "Is that really what you want?" I considered the question carefully. "Yes," I said finally. "It is." "Because of the ring, Vanessa? I can explain." "It wasn't just the ring," I interrupted, determined to maintain control of the conversation. "It was what the ring represented. The wilted flowers versus the custom jewelry. The priority you placed on her feelings over mine. The way you lit up around her in a way you never did with me." He flinched at each point, unable to meet my eyes. "I made a stupid, thoughtless mistake. But one mistake shouldn't end a marriage. Our marriage ended before it began," I replied calmly. "The ring was just the final confirmation of what I'd suspected for months, that I was your second choice. Your safe option after Sabrina left." "That's not true," he protested, finally looking directly at me. "I chose you. I married you. You married me because I was available and agreeable, because I represented stability and comfort." I leaned forward slightly. "Tell me honestly, Ethan, if Sabrina had stayed in Iowa instead of moving to New York, would you have ever asked me out?" His hesitation was answer enough. "That's what I thought," I said softly. "It's more complicated than that," he insisted. "Yes, Sabrina and I had history. Yes, there was intensity there. But that kind of relationship burns out, Vanessa. What we had was sustainable." "Sustainable," I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue, like a practical investment, a sensible choice. I shook my head. "I deserve more than being someone's sensible choice." "I did love you," he said, and I believed him. In his way, with his limited capacity, he had. "But not enough," I countered. "Not fully. And I've realized that I'd rather be alone than be partially loved." A young family passed by our bench, the parents pushing a stroller while a toddler waddled alongside them. Both Ethan and I watched them in silence, perhaps thinking of the future we'd planned but would never share. "I returned the ring," Ethan said after they passed. "The one I gave Sabrina. She tried to give it back, but I told her to keep it or sell it. I don't care anymore." "It doesn't matter," I said truthfully. "Whether she keeps it or returns it doesn't change anything between us." "What about the house?" he asked, shifting to practical matters. "We were supposed to close next month. The farmhouse on the outskirts of town, 3 bedrooms, an updated kitchen, enough yard for the garden I'd always wanted. Another future erased. You can take it if you want it," I offered. "Or we can back out together. I won't be staying in. Cedar Falls much longer anyway." His head snapped up. "You're leaving? Where will you go?" "Phoenix, probably. There's a teaching position open at a school near my parents'. I applied yesterday." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "The job you wanted to consider last year. The one I said was too far from my firm." I nodded, surprised he remembered. It feels like the right time for a fresh start. Because of me? The question held a mixture of guilt and something like wounded pride. Because of me, I corrected. Because I finally realize I've been shaping my life around other people's expectations and limitations for too long. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, watching a squirrel dart up the trunk of a nearby oak. I'm sorry, he said finally. Not just for the ring, but for making you feel like you were anything less than extraordinary. You deserved better. The sincerity in his voice brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you for saying that. Will you be okay? He asked, genuine concern in his expression. I smiled, the gesture no longer forced. Yes, I really will. And the annulment? I still want it, I confirmed. A clean break is best for both of us. A chance to start over without the shadow of a failed marriage following us. He nodded slowly. I'll sign the papers today and have them delivered to Layla's office. Thank you. I stood, signaling the end of our conversation. I should go. Ethan rose as well, uncertainty evident in his posture. Is this goodbye then? Yes, I said gently. I think it is. He took a step toward me, then hesitated. Would it be okay if I hugged you? One last time? The request was so unexpectedly vulnerable that it caught me off guard. After a moment's consideration, I nodded. His embrace was brief but sincere, his familiar scent triggering a cascade of memories, both good and painful. As we separated, I saw moisture in his eyes. I hope you find what you're looking for, Vanessa, he said quietly. Someone who recognizes your worth from the start. I hope you find clarity, I replied, about what and who you really want. We parted without further words, walking in opposite directions across the sunlit park. With each step, the knot in my chest loosened a little more, breathing becoming easier, the future looking brighter. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. How did it go? Need rescue? All done, I typed back. It was civil, healing even, meeting you at the cafe in 20. As I reached the park exit, I turned for one last look. Ethan had already disappeared from view, continuing his path toward whatever awaited him, and I found, somewhat to my surprise, that I genuinely wished him well, not because I still loved him, but because forgiveness, I was discovering, was a gift. I gave myself. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as I carried the last box from my car to my new apartment. August in Phoenix was an entirely different experience from Iowa summers, dry, intense heat that seemed to radiate from every surface. 3 months after walking away from my one-day marriage, I was officially starting over in a new state, a new city, a new life. The apartment was modest, but perfect for my needs. A one-bedroom on the second floor of a complex with a community pool and desert landscaping. Large windows let in abundant natural light, and the small balcony offered views of distant mountains. It wasn't grand, but it was mine, every inch reflecting choices I'd made for myself alone. My mother appeared in the doorway, fanning herself dramatically. That's the last of it. I still think you should have hired movers. I didn't have that much to bring, I reminded her, collapsing onto the newly delivered sofa. After leaving most of the furniture and joint possessions behind in Cedar Falls, my worldly belongings had been reduced to essentials: clothes, books, teaching materials, and a few sentimental items. Well, you're officially moved in, she declared, sitting beside me. How does it feel? I considered the question, looking around at the boxes waiting to be unpacked, the blank walls anticipating personal touches, the empty kitchen ready for new memories to be made. It feels like freedom, I answered honestly. Mom squeezed my hand. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. Not many people would have had the courage to do what you did. Not sure it was courage. So much as self-preservation, I admitted. Same thing sometimes. She smiled, the crinkles around her eyes deepening. Now, your father's bringing takeout for dinner. After that, we'll help you unpack the bedroom at least, so you have somewhere proper to sleep tonight. You don't have to. We want to, she interrupted firmly. That's what family does. The simple statement warmed me more than the Arizona heat ever could. Throughout the upheaval of the past months, my parents had been steadfastly supportive, never questioning my decision, never suggesting I try to reconcile with Ethan, simply offering practical help and emotional stability when I needed it most. That evening, as we ate Thai food on the floor of my new living room, I felt a contentment I hadn't experienced in years. My father regaled us with stories about the neighborhood characters he'd already met at his morning coffee shop, While my mother sketched plans for curtains, she insisted on sewing for my bedroom windows. The school called while you were unloading, Mom mentioned as she gathered empty containers. The principal, what was her name? Ms. Delaney, I supplied. Right, she wanted to confirm you can come. In tomorrow to set up your classroom. She said the custodian will be there all day if you need anything moved. My stomach fluttered with nervous excitement. 3rd grade at Phoenix Elementary, a fresh start professionally as well as personally. The interview back in May had gone surprisingly well, with Ms. Delaney particularly impressed by my curriculum ideas for incorporating local ecology and Native American history into standard lessons. I should go to bed early then, I said, checking my watch. First impressions and all that. After my parents left for their nearby condo, purchased partly to be near me, partly as a winter escape from Iowa, I stood alone in my new space. The silence was profound but not oppressive. It felt like possibility, like potential, like a blank page awaiting. The first words of a new story. I unpacked my favorite mug, hand-painted by one of last year's students, and made a cup of chamomile tea. Carrying it to the balcony, I sat watching the sunset transform the desert landscape into a canvas of oranges, pinks, and purples. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. Settled in yet? Miss you already? Farm feels empty without my refugee roommate. I smiled, typing back, all moved in, starting at school tomorrow. Miss you too. Visit soon? Her response came quickly. Booking tickets for fall break. Dying to escape corn country for a bit. P.S. Saw Ethan today at the grocery store. He looked subdued. Asked about you. I hesitated before asking, what did you tell him? That you were thriving in Arizona. That leaving was the best decision you ever made. That was okay, right? Perfect, I replied, feeling no twinge of regret or curiosity. The annulment had been finalized in July, the process mercifully quick and uncomplicated. Ethan had kept his word, signing the papers without contest, even covering the legal fees as a final gesture of contrition. Setting my phone aside, I returned to contemplating the sunset. Phoenix, the mythical bird, rising from ashes to begin anew. The symbolism hadn't been lost on me when I'd accepted the position here. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor about these things. The next morning, I arrived at Phoenix Elementary 2 hours before other teachers were expected. The school was modern compared to Cedar Falls Elementary, single-story with generous windows and colorful murals depicting desert, wildlife, and local landmarks. My classroom, room 118, was empty, but full of potential. Standard-issue desks arranged in rows, bare bulletin boards awaiting inspiration, empty bookshelves ready to be filled with adventures and knowledge. I set to work immediately, transforming the sterile space into something welcoming. The desert-themed border went up first around the bulletin boards, followed by laminated welcome signs with each student's name. I arranged the desks in collaborative clusters rather than rows, created a cozy reading corner with pillows and a small rug, and began unpacking boxes of books, carefully selected titles representing diverse characters and experiences. You've been busy, came a voice from the doorway. I turned to find Ms. Delaney, a tall woman with silver-streaked black hair and kind eyes behind stylish glasses, surveying my progress. Just getting started, I replied with a smile. I want everything ready for the students on Monday. She nodded approvingly. Most of our 3rd graders come from challenging backgrounds. Creating a welcoming environment makes a tremendous difference. She gestured to the reading corner. I see you're prioritizing literacy. It's the foundation for everything else, I agreed. If they fall behind in reading now, they may never catch up, she finished. Exactly why we hired you, Ms. Green. Your passion was evident in your interview. Thank you for taking a chance on me, I said sincerely. Relocating teachers aren't always the easiest hire. Sometimes fresh perspectives are exactly what we need. She glanced at her watch. Staff meeting at noon in the library. Just a casual lunch to welcome everyone back. Looking forward to introducing you. After she left, I continued arranging my classroom, pausing occasionally to jot down ideas for first-week activities. By noon, the transformation was well underway, the space beginning to reflect my teaching philosophy and personal style. The library was buzzing with conversation when I arrived, teachers greeting each other after summer break, exchanging stories and updates. As the newcomer, I felt the familiar flutter of anxiety that accompanies being the stranger in an established group. You must be Vanessa, said a friendly voice beside me. A woman about my age with curly auburn hair and a warm smile extended her hand. I'm Sophia Martinez, 4th grade. I'll be getting your students next year, so I thought I should introduce myself. Nice to meet you, I replied, grateful for the welcome. Come sit with us, she offered, gesturing to a table where several teachers were already assembled. We'll give you the unofficial tour of Phoenix elementary culture. By the end of lunch, I'd met most of the staff and received numerous offers of help, classroom supplies, and invitations to weekend social gatherings. The warmth of the welcome was unexpected but deeply appreciated. As I returned to my classroom that afternoon, I felt the last lingering doubts about my decision to move dissolve. Cedar Falls had been home, but it had also become a place defined by what I'd lost or never really had. Phoenix represented possibility, a chance to define myself on my own terms, without the shadow of being the teacher who left her husband the day after the wedding. Here, I was simply Ms. Green, the new third-grade teacher from the Midwest, with innovative ideas and a passion for literacy. And for now, that was more than enough. 1 year. It had been exactly 1 year since I'd placed a wooden box on my honeymoon bed and walked away from a marriage that had barely begun. Standing in my classroom watching my third graders file out for summer break, I marveled at how much had changed in 12 short months. Ms. Green, I made this for you. Elena, a bright-eyed girl with perpetually untied shoelaces, thrust a handmade card into my hands. So you don't forget me over summer. As if I could forget you, I laughed, kneeling to her level. Thank you, Elena. I'll treasure this. The card joined dozens of others on my desk, heartfelt creations from children who had become more than students to me. In a year marked by transition and self-discovery, these 23 young minds had given me purpose, challenged me daily, and reminded me what genuine joy felt like. As the last child departed with a dramatic wave, Sophia appeared in my doorway. Another year survived, she declared, collapsing dramatically into a student chair much too small for her adult frame. Please tell me you're still joining us for the end-of-year happy hour at Cactus Bloom. Wouldn't miss it, I assured her, gathering the handmade cards into a special folder I kept for such treasures. Just need to finish a few things here first. Don't be too long. Marcus has been asking if you're coming. Her tone was deliberately casual, but her raised eyebrow spoke volumes. Marcus Chen taught 5th grade and coached the school's chess club. Over the past few months, our casual friendship had evolved into something neither of us had defined yet. Coffee meetings that ran long, text conversations that stretched into the night, shared interests in hiking, and classic films that led to weekend outings carefully labeled as just friendly. Marcus knows I'll be there, I replied, ignoring her suggestive tone. We're carpooling, actually. Sophia's grin widened. Of course you are. Very eco-conscious of you both. After she left, I turned to the task of preparing my classroom for summer dormancy, covering bookshelves, storing supplies, taking down the elaborate solar system display we'd created for our final science unit. The work was methodical, almost meditative, giving me space to reflect on the year that had passed. The first day of school last August had been terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. My students, primarily from working-class and immigrant families, had eyed me with the wary curiosity children reserve for new adults in their lives. By the end of that first week, I'd learned all their names, assessed their reading levels, and begun the delicate process of earning their trust. Each small victory thereafter had affirmed my decision to start fresh in Phoenix. Jaden finally mastering long division after weeks of struggle. Maria finding her voice through the class poetry project. The entire class cheering when our desert butterfly garden successfully attracted its first monarch. These moments, seemingly small in isolation, had accumulated into a tapestry of purpose and belonging that I'd never quite achieved in Cedar Falls. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Still good for 4:30? I can pick you up at your classroom. Perfect. Almost done here, I replied, smiling at the flutter of anticipation his message triggered. At 40, Marcus was 7 years my senior, divorced for 5 years with joint custody of a 12-year-old son, Michael. He spoke 4 languages, made terrible puns, and approached his teaching with a dedication that matched my own. Our friendship had begun in the faculty lounge over shared frustration with standardized testing requirements and had grown organically from there. Yet despite Sophia's teasing and the obvious chemistry between us, I'd maintained careful boundaries. The wound of my failed marriage had healed, but the scar tissue remained sensitive, a caution against rushing into another relationship before I was truly ready. As I taped the last box of supplies, a notification from Instagram appeared on my phone, Amanda posting photos from her visit last month. I scrolled through images of us hiking Camelback Mountain, exploring the desert botanical garden, and laughing over margaritas at my favorite local Mexican restaurant. The last photo gave me pause. A candid shot of me gazing at the sunset from my apartment balcony, profile illuminated by golden light, expression peaceful and content. Amanda had captioned it simply, "Phoenix Rising." The metaphor wasn't subtle, but it was accurate. From the ashes of my brief marriage and shattered expectations, something new and authentic had emerged. Not just survival, but genuine thriving. A knock at my classroom door interrupted my reminiscence. Marcus stood there, casual in jeans and a chambray shirt, his dark hair slightly rumpled from running his hands through it. A habit I'd noticed emerged when he was grading particularly creative student work. "Ready to celebrate another successful year of molding young minds?" he asked, with a smile that always seemed to reach his eyes. "Absolutely," I replied, gathering my belongings. Though molding sounds slightly ominous, I prefer inspiring or guiding. "Always the optimist," he teased as we walked toward the parking lot. "That's why the kids adore you." The drive to Cactus Bloom was filled with comfortable conversation about summer plans, his annual camping trip with Michael, my upcoming visit to Iowa to see Amanda, potential professional development workshops we were both considering. The restaurant was already bustling with teachers when we arrived, pitchers of margaritas circulating, appetizers crowding tables. Sophia waved us over to a corner booth where she sat with several colleagues. "Finally!" she exclaimed. "We were about to send a search party." The evening unfolded in a blur of laughter, stories, and good-natured complaints about bureaucratic absurdities all teachers understand. Surrounded by these people who had become friends over the past year, I felt a sense of belonging I'd once thought I'd only find in my hometown. As the gathering began to thin, Marcus leaned closer to be heard over the music. "Would you like to go for a walk? The canal path is nice this time of evening." The invitation held no pressure, just the simple offer of extended company. I nodded, surprised by how natural it felt to transition from group celebration to private conversation. The canal path wound alongside an artificial waterway, lined with desert plants and artwork, the evening air finally cooling as the sun descended. We walked in comfortable silence for several minutes before Marcus spoke. "I've been wanting to ask you something," he began, his tone carefully neutral. But I wasn't sure if the timing was right. My heart quickened slightly. "What is it?" He stopped walking, turning to face me directly. "I know you've been through a lot this past year, and I respect how you've handled it, coming to a new city, building a new life, becoming such an incredible presence at our school." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "I've enjoyed getting to know you, Vanessa, more than enjoyed it, and I was wondering if you might be interested in seeing where this could go, officially, not just as colleagues or friends." The question hung between us, honest and unadorned. A year ago, such directness might have triggered retreat. Now it felt refreshingly clear. "I'd like that," I replied, my voice steady and sure. "But I should warn you, I move at my own pace now. I've learned the hard way what happens when you ignore your instincts." His smile was understanding. "I'm not in any rush. Some things are worth doing." "Right." As we continued walking, his hand found mine. A simple connection, unforced and comfortable. In that moment, I realized that this too was part of rising from the ashes. The capacity to trust again, not blindly, but with eyes wide open. 2 years to the day after my wedding that wasn't, I found myself back in Cedar Falls, sitting on Amanda's porch swing. The Iowa summer evening was perfect. Fireflies dancing over the cornfields, cicadas providing their rhythmic soundtrack, sunset painting the sky in watercolor strokes of pink and orange. "I still can't believe you're really doing this," Amanda said, swirling wine in her glass. "Moving back to Iowa." "Not permanently," I clarified for the 10th time. "Just for the year. The teacher exchange program is perfect. I'll be back in Phoenix next fall." The opportunity had appeared unexpectedly in my email 3 months ago, a chance to participate in a nationwide exchange where teachers swapped classrooms for an academic year. When Cedar Falls Elementary showed up on the list of participating schools, I'd felt a strange sense of destiny. "And Marcus is okay with the long distance?" she asked, eyebrow raised. I smiled, thinking of our conversation before I'd left Arizona. After a year of dating with intentional slowness, our relationship had solidified into something built on mutual respect, shared values, and a connection that deepened rather than diminished with time. "He understands why I need to do this," I explained. Some circles need closing properly before new ones can begin. Amanda nodded, reaching to refill my glass. Well, the timing worked out perfectly with my wedding planning. I need my maid of honor on site for all the critical decisions. Her engagement to Ryan, a local veterinarian she'd known since high school, but only started dating after my brief stay at the farm, had been the highlight of last Christmas. Their wedding was scheduled for October, a harvest celebration at the farm that promised to be as warm and unpretentious as they were. Speaking of timing, I said, setting down my wine, there's somewhere I need to go tomorrow. Would you mind driving me? The next morning found us pulling into the parking lot of Riverside Storage, a facility on the outskirts of town where I'd rented a small unit before leaving for Phoenix. Most of my possessions had either moved with me or been donated, but some things had required more deliberation than my hasty departure allowed. The storage unit door rolled up to reveal a space mostly empty except for a few boxes labeled keepsakes and winter clothes. But it was the wooden box sitting on a small table in the center that had brought me here. Is that? Amanda began. The box, I confirmed. The one from the hotel room. I approached it slowly, running my fingers over the smooth surface. Unlike the first box, the one I'd left for Ethan containing evidence of his betrayal, this box had remained sealed for 2 years, containing memories I hadn't been ready to face. You don't have to do this now, Amanda said gently. Whatever's in there has waited this long. That's why I need to open it, I explained. Because it's waited long enough. With a deep breath, I lifted the lid. Inside lay carefully preserved mementos of a life planned but never lived. The handwritten vows I'd composed the night before my wedding, dried petals from my bridal bouquet, the diamond earrings my grandmother had worn at her own wedding, lent to me as something old, and a sealed envelope with Ethan's name written in my careful script. It was the letter I'd written but never delivered, words too raw, too honest to leave behind that morning. Instead, I'd sealed them away, a time capsule of pain and disappointment. Do you want me to leave you alone? Amanda asked. I shook my head. No, I'd like you to witness this. Opening the envelope, I began to read aloud the words I'd written 2 years earlier. Ethan, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Not just from this room or this marriage, but from the life we planned together. Yesterday, when you gave Sabrina that ring while handing me dying flowers, something broke inside me. Not my heart, but the illusion that I could ever be enough for you. I realize now that I've spent our entire relationship trying to fit myself into the Sabrina-shaped hole in your life, convincing myself that practical compatibility was enough, that passion was overrated, that stability trumped joy. I was wrong. I deserve to be cherished, not tolerated, to be chosen fully, not settled for, and you deserve the chance to be honest with yourself about what and who you really want. This isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about dignity and truth. May we both find what we're truly looking for. Vanessa. As I finished reading, I realized I was crying, not from renewed pain, but from recognition of how far I'd come from the woman who wrote those words. Powerful stuff, Amanda said softly. Are you okay? I nodded, carefully refolding the letter. Better than okay. I needed to remember who I was then to appreciate who I am now. We gathered the contents of the box, securing them in a tote bag to take with us. Before leaving, I took one last look at the empty wooden box. What are you going to do with it? Amanda asked. I think I'll keep it, I decided, as a reminder. Of what? The worst day of your life? I smiled, shaking my head. Of the day I chose myself, the day I realized my worth wasn't determined by how others valued me, but by how I valued myself. That evening, I visited Cedar Falls Elementary to prepare for the upcoming school year. The familiar hallways held ghosts of my former life, but they no longer haunted me. This was no longer the place I'd fled in heartbreak, but simply one chapter in a much longer story. As I arranged my temporary classroom, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. How's Iowa treating you? Michael says hi and wants to know if, there are real tornadoes there like in Wizard of Oz. I smiled, typing back, all good here. Tell Michael the tornadoes are real, but less colorful. Missing you both. His response came quickly. We miss you too. Apartment feels empty without your books everywhere. Call tonight? A warm certainty settled in my chest. The knowledge that what waited for me in Phoenix was real and solid, built on truth, rather than convenience or compromise. As I left the school, I nearly collided with someone entering the main doors. a man in a business suit, distracted by papers in his hand. "Excuse me," we said simultaneously, both looking up in surprise. "Ethan," I breathed, recognition washing over me. He looked different, older somehow, though only 2 years had passed. His hair was shorter, his frame slimmer, his eyes carrying a wisdom that hadn't been there before. "Vanessa," he replied, genuine warmth in his voice. "I heard you were coming back for the exchange program. Welcome home." "Thank you," I said, studying him with curious detachment. "What brings you to the elementary school?" "School board meeting," he explained, holding up the papers. "I joined last year, trying to give back to the community." The awkwardness I'd expected didn't materialize. Instead, there was a comfortable distance, the kind that comes from shared history processed and accepted rather than denied. "How have you been?" I asked, and meant it. "Good. Really good, actually." He hesitated, then continued with quiet sincerity. "What happened between us, it forced me to do some serious self-reflection about what I really wanted, who I really was. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary." "I understand that completely," I replied with a small smile. "Are you happy, Vanessa?" he asked, the question simple but profound. "Yes," I answered without hesitation. "Genuinely happy." He nodded, satisfaction rather than regret in his expression. "You deserve that. You always did." We parted with cordial goodbyes. No lingering glances or unspoken regrets. Just two people who had once tried to build a life together and were now better for having failed. Walking to my car under the Iowa summer twilight, I felt the final piece click into place. The circle had closed. The story had ended, not with bitterness or regret, but with peace and the quiet dignity of lessons learned. Later that night, I called Marcus. From Amanda's porch swing, the wooden box beside me, empty now of its painful contents, ready to hold new memories. "I saw Ethan today," I told him, watching fireflies rise from the darkening fields. "How was that?" he asked. No jealousy or insecurity in his tone, just genuine concern for my well-being. "Surprisingly healing," I admitted. "Like reading the final chapter of a book you've already set aside." "And was it a good ending?" I considered the question, thinking of the journey from that hotel room 2 years ago to this moment, of Phoenix classrooms and desert sunsets, of new friendships and rediscovered purpose, of a love that had grown naturally rather than being forced. Not an ending at all, I realized aloud, just the necessary conclusion of one story before the beginning of another. In the distance, a shooting star streaked across the Iowa sky, brief, brilliant, and beautiful in its transition. Like the best parts of life itself, it didn't need to last forever to matter. It simply needed to be witnessed, appreciated, and remembered for what it was, a moment of light in the vast continuing journey. "The truth is," I said softly, "sometimes the most powerful thing you can leave behind is not revenge or regret, but simply the person you no longer need to be." And in that moment, surrounded by crickets and starlight, the wooden box beside me empty of old pain but filled with new possibility, I knew with absolute certainty that I had found what I'd been looking for all along. Not in someone else's validation, but in my own unwavering recognition of my worth.